It's 16th century Europe, and a fiery trial is underway. Women accused of witchcraft scream for mercy as the crowd stares, some trembling, some eager. But what if these witches aren't just victims? They're the frontline soldiers in the brutal birth of capitalism. Silvia Federici throws us into this raw, relentless world where bodies become battlegrounds, and the horrific witch hunts are just the start of a revolution that reshapes everything you thought about work, power, and freedom. Federici dives into how peasant revolts weren't just protests. They were challenges to controlling bodies themselves, sparking a crackdown that's still echoing today. In the late 1400s, peasants across Europe, from the English commons to the Italian countryside, rose up, screaming for land, basic rights, and control over their labor. Federici paints scenes of entire villages burning down manorial estates. These revolts terrified the noble class, who saw rebellious bodies as threats to the emerging economic order. Think of the body like a factory machine. If the owner can't command its motion and output, chaos reigns. Capitalism demands disciplined, predictable workers, so bodies were literally enclosed, through laws, violence, and cultural norms, turning flesh into labor power. This isn't metaphor, it's a violent engineering of human flesh for profit. The witch hunts weren't just superstitious mass hysteria. Federici shows these horrors as calculated moves to crush female autonomy and communal caregiving. Women's bodies became the front line, demonized to justify brutal social restructurings, fueling capitalist accumulation by breaking down older communal ways of life. Federici shows how the transition to capitalism wasn't just about markets or factories. It was a ruthless remaking of the body, gender, and reproduction to create obedient laborers. When common lands were fenced off in England and beyond, peasants lost access to vital resources. Federici highlights the violent eviction of women and men who relied on shared fields and forests. This wasn't just land theft. It was an attack on collective ways of sustaining life and raising children outside capitalist wage labor. Witch hunts also reveal how gendered violence enforced new labor divisions. Women's reproductive roles were controlled and exploited as unpaid labor, ensuring men's domination both at work and in the home. Federici tears down myths that work starts at the factory gate. The real groundwork is in controlling bodies and caregiving labor invisible to markets. The rise of mechanical philosophy, think Descartes separating mind and body, was no neutral science. It justified treating bodies as machines, stripping away value from lived experience, emotion, and community. This split underpins modern capitalism's cold rationality, turning human beings into cogs in economic engines. Here's where the pieces snap together. Witch hunts aren't just horror stories. They're a brutal chapter in capitalism's rise, but also a call to fight back. Federici powerfully names witches as women resisting enclosure, patriarchy, and loss of autonomy. They were midwives, healers, rebel figures holding threads of pre-capitalist community life. Their persecution was a systemic attack to erase social bonds that threatened the new order. Behind the flames and torture was the state's ruthless machinery. Federici traces how capitalist states weaponized laws, science, and terror to enforce new social relations focused on individual property and labor control. Capitalism's birth is soaked in blood. It's not just an economic system, but a violent political project. But Federici ends on a fierce, hopeful note. Just as we must acknowledge these brutal foundations, we can also reclaim power through collective care, feminism, and community solidarity. The fight against the witch is ongoing. Resisting alienation and reclaiming our bodies and societies is the next frontier. Remember those terrified faces at the witch trial? Federici shows us they weren't just victims. They were symbols of a vast, violent transformation controlling bodies to birth capitalism. Next time you think about labor or freedom, ask, who owns your body and your work? Try paying attention to the small acts of care and rebellion in your life. They're the sparks of a new commons waiting to ignite. Subscribe for more book summaries like this one.